All right, Nate. Yeah, Nate, you want to go?
Yeah. Hey, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to our React workshop number 2. Yeah, and I'm Nate, and I'm joined, so we can continue on to next slide. So just wanted to quickly recap what we talked about in workshop 1, just so everyone's on the same page. We talked about some like the basics of React, such a popular framework in today's web applications. So couple things I wanted to highlight that we talked about before, just to jog everybody's memory. The first thing I wanted to talk about was components. So each building block or each UI element in React is reusable. And it's contained within a component, which contains all of the info and all of the, so it contains all of the components info and also contains all of its logic, and it contains like all of its visuals and what makes it like look how it is. And that's created by JSX, which we also talked about previously, but JSX is basically a way that you combine JavaScript expressions, with HTML expressions. So this basically allows you to elements that are controlled by JavaScript expressions much more easily than how it was handled previously. And then state is kind of like what we talked about before. Used the analogy that state is kind of like the instance variables in like a Java class. So it contains like all the data that a component needs to operate. And then props is basically a way that you can use polymorphism on a component and pass it different variables to make it behave in a different way. For example, if I want a form to be for, you can use the same form for like an email address and maybe like a username, and just pass it different props, and then and you can change the behavior on those props. So, and last thing I want to talk about was performance. So React all time a UI element changes, but what you had to do before was pretty much refresh the entire page. But how React does it is it keeps basically a copy called a virtual of the regular DOM, which is basically just the website. It keeps a copy of this. Um, and instead of re-rendering the whole page, what you need to know is basically just re-renders the specific element that was changed. And this saves a lot of time because obviously you don't need to refresh everything if only one thing is changing. So that's pretty much it for the recap. So we can go on to the next. Right. So I just want to go through a table of contents of kind of what you're on today. Um, so how we presented this, and how we have this set up for you guys is we have a project that we are going to kind of run through and kind of show you guys um, how you can use all of these different new ideas. And we're going to be building a little bit on top of it. So if you want to, you can follow along. We provided a link to the repo, and you can kind of follow along. So if it's easier to understand this way. But just to touch upon all the new ideas really quickly, we're going to be talking about Bootstrap, other styling paradigms, the Flexbox, React Router. We'll be talking about action listeners slash handlers such as like onClick, and we'll also be handling HTTP requests, which can help your React app hook up with other different resources. So we can move on to the first idea, which is Bootstrap.
Thanks, Nate. So Bootstrap is really a way for front-end developers to spend less time worrying about how things look and more time worrying about like how they're going to work in production, right? A way of making UI elements that look really quality and are responsive at a much faster rate than doing everything by hand. And so to start here, I'm going to exit out of the slideshow here, and we'll give a brief demonstration. So if I can get to my tab here. I'm sorry. So React Bootstrap is a very popular framework for Bootstrap when using React. Bootstrap itself is really just a CSS library that gives you nice designs for a lot of common components. And when you use React Bootstrap, you can use the same components that you would make in app just by default. So if we click here, and I'll just do a brief of their website here, you can see it's reactbootstrap.github.io. You can see they've got these components for alerts. Other ones you'll see today, we have cards going on. They have nice buttons that also have different animations and different stylings. And one of the important things to come with a consistent color scheme and design language that makes it a lot easier to work with them in a production environment. So for example, with Bootstrap, everything has variants, right? And you'll see a couple different ones of them in the demonstration today. For example, here you can see like this is a primary button, a secondary button, and so forth and so on. And so now we'll go over here, and this is a simple React app that Nate and I made for this demonstration here. And you can see that we're using all Bootstrap components. And this app really did not take a lot of time, but it does look pretty professional. All the styling is similar. The colors are the same. It follows the nice design guideline, and it has nice animations and things like that you would expect in a production level. It's kind of a little taste of what's to come, but you can see this is a home page here. You can have like alerts for your users to see new information. Over here, you can see an account page that I built in literally 5 minutes, and you can see that it looks pretty professional. And then you can see this request demo here, and we'll talk more about this later. But these are just a couple pages, and I don't know, Nate, if you want to talk, but this really took like only 5-10 minutes to make. One of the best parts is that it's responsive as well, so that when your user uses it on a mobile device, they'll also get a really first class experience.
Yeah, I think that's good. We just might want to look into the code on the Bootstrap stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I'll just show a little bit here on the home page. If you're using React Bootstrap, it's really a pretty simple process. The main thing you need to do after you install the React Bootstrap module is add the Bootstrap CSS into your app file here. So Bootstrap CSS is maintained by Twitter, and they update it regularly. I think Bootstrap version 5 came out recently with some nice design style changes. And you can add their CSS to your own project. And then when you use any React Bootstrap component, pardon me, it all is very easy to use. So I'll go over here to the home page, and you saw this alert right here, and you can see here that we import the alert component from React Bootstrap, and then all it takes to make is really just you just open your HTML tags like you would any other component, and then put your text here, and then you can also give it a variant. So right now it's success, but there are also lots of other variants. So here I can make it like secondary. And then when we come back over here, you can see that it's now the dark gray color. That's the default secondary color. So I'll put that back to success there because I think the green looks nice on the home page. And that's just one example. You can see we use cards here and then Bootstrap buttons down here. And they really function the same as most normal HTML components, except they're styled differently. And one other thing I'll mention is that there's a lot of other CSS libraries out there. For example, Material UI is very popular if you like the design of Google products, which is Microsoft's design language. There's a new popular one called Ant Design that's very similar to Bootstrap, but a little bit different in some ways. And so it's worth checking out if you're doing front-end development on your own without a lot of designers helping, because it can make your apps look really good for very little effort.
Yeah, we even like our navigation bar was also um, Bootstrap. Yeah,
Bootstrap.
so it's um, and the website's super easy if you wanted to just take a look. They have code snippets. You can literally just copy paste. If you want a button, you literally all you gotta do is their snippet, bang, you have a button. So it's really nice. Um, yeah. So now we will
So
be moving on to the CSS Flexbox. So basically, what the CSS Flexbox is, it's pretty much the modern way to organize and style the responsive. Um, so we can just go into the demo so we can show this pretty nicely. But the idea is that um, not every single person will be looking at the application on like the same screen, right? And if you have like these 5 elements that I kind of put up here, you're going to want them to kind of wrap around at some certain point, at certain breakpoints. So that's kind of how it's handled within the uh, in the modern way. They are able to handle it using the Flexbox, because the Flexbox has these what are they called? They're called like breakpoints, where it's like there's a difference between like an extra small screen, a phone, which is called a phone, and then you have like your small screen, which would be your tablet, and then a medium screen with laptop, and then a large screen would be like desktop plus. Um, and there's different breakpoints. So if you can just go through, I know he's been doing this a lot already. He already was going through. Can you go through the responsiveness again?
Yeah.
So as you can see, like on different breakpoints, these they start to wrap around nicely, and it's organized into rows and columns. So if you can go into the code, I can kind of show how I did this.
Yep, let me
Um,
just close this up here. And I just want to mention that the tool we're using to resize there, if you just right click in any browser and inspect the element, most browsers have the ability to like change the screen size to like an iPhone or an iPad or any of the normal screen sizes you'd expect. And it's really useful when you're working with HTML and CSS like this.
yeah. So going into the CSS Flexbox, so there's these React Bootstrap offers us a nice abstraction on top of these the CSS Flexbox. So it has a container that you put these in, and that pretty much handles like the borders for you and like the margins. So like it's not like pressed right up against the edge of the page, so it handles it nicely. And as you can kind of see here, this is how I handled it. So I created a row, which is basically just a set like width that you can put content in. And then I wanted to have 5 columns, and I just made them different colors. And it's pretty nice because it gives them all equal alignment. But if you can look on the React Bootstrap website, but you can kind of see if you want one column to be bigger, you can do that with different props. Um, but this is pretty much how it's handled. Is if you want to make another row, obviously you could. You can. Do you mind just copy
Yeah,
and
here.
pasting this
Yeah.
so you can see like what another row might look like? Yeah, so just save that. Yeah, so now we have 2 rows. It's pretty nice, and then they'll wrap around nicely, obviously. Um, yes, so this would be helpful if you're making like a use case for this. I'm thinking about is like a image gallery or something. If you want them to obviously wrap like smushed on mobile, that would look terrible. Um, but yeah, they have a really nice snippets and stuff that you can use on React Bootstrap website if you wanted to take a closer look into this stuff. So that's pretty much it for the Flexbox. Do you have anything you want?
I'll just say that we're going to do another demo later on that shows like a more practical use of flex boxes, and so you're going to see something that's a little bit more like applicable than just like the colored boxes here. But the colored boxes are nice to show how they actually work on for real. So jumping back to the presentation here, the next thing we'd like to talk about is React Router. So React Router is not built into React. It's an NPM module, but it's honestly one of the most important things that you can use with React. It allows for you to turn a single page application behavior, but you get the same benefits of using React for everything, React the whole way down. So you love the page, and it's a cleaner experience for your users. And chances are you've probably encountered React routing on a lot of different websites you've gone to. If you ever click a link and the page changes, but your page doesn't reload, then most likely you're using React or another one of the modern web frameworks with a router like this. So I'll just exit out here. And the first thing I'll say is that the project that we built is entirely React, right? And when I switch between these different links up here, you can see that this where we are on the website, like the slash at the end of the domain, is changing, but the page isn't refreshing. It's just putting a different component in front of us here. And this is React Router at work. And so now I'll go over the code and I'll show exactly what's happening. So this is inside of our app.js, which is really like the root of our project. And to use React Router, it's really quite simple. All you have to do is add the React Router DOM npm package. And this is one of the most popular npm packages. It's got lots of support. It's very robust and well tested. and then you import a router, a switch, a route, and a link. You don't need the link for the app here, but this is just sort of like the generic import statement that you'd want to use. The most important thing you need to do is wrap your whole app inside of a router component like this. Inside the router component, now you can actually switch between different routes and paths. And so here you can see that we have our router on the outside. And then what I like to do is I like to put my navigation bar inside the router here, but it's not actually a path, right? So we make sure that the navigation bar is always visible. And so it's just rendered the same. And there's no need to put it inside the switch statement down here. Then we get to this switch statement, which is another part of React Router. The switch statement lets us switch between different routes that we have available to. So you can see here inside the switch, we have 4 different routes. And a route is a component that associates a path here, so /home, for example, with a component that we'd like to have displayed. So when we go over here to the website, if I'm on the request page and I manually go up here and type /home and hit enter, you can see that the page refreshed and we showed up on the home screen here. The same is true with like /account here, with the flex for the box demonstration we gave, and then for request with the request demonstration we gave. And you can see that when we click between these links, the URL changes and the page changes with it, and that's how routing works. One thing I'll mention is that the switch component here, there are 2 choices. You can either use a switch or a router, and the switch component will choose the first matching URL, whereas a router will choose all matching URLs. So for example, if you had a path that was /home and then another path that was like /home page, the router, if the URL was actually /home, the router would show both the home and the home page components, but the switch will choose the first matching one. And in most cases, you'll want to use a switch, and that's why we use one in this situation here. Now,
Yeah,
what
can
I'd
you show? Oh, sorry. Are you gonna? I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry. Are you gonna show the navigation?
Yeah, I was just about to do that. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
So as you can see at the top here, when I click these buttons, the link changes, and I'm going to show you how that's happening. So if we go over here to navigation.js, which is our nav bar, the first thing you can see is that the nav bar here is imported from React Bootstrap. So all the styling is done for us. And down here, we have these nav links, which are associated with what you see up at the top of the bar here. And so this is the home link. And what I do is I import link from React Router. And so what link lets us do is it lets us change that URL without refreshing the page. And so you can do nav.link. And this is specific if you're using React Router with React Bootstrap, which is a great pairing in my opinion, and something that I would strongly recommend you do, is you can do nav.link to get that nice CSS styling, and you say as link. And what this does is it means that this nav.link, all it really is doing is styling the look of the link. And so when we say as link, it also adds all the functionality of the React router's link component, which lets us change it. And then we add this to prop here, which is where we want the link to go to. And so in this case, we say /home. And you can see that if we're on nothing here, and I click on the home page here, this /home appears and the component appears down here. And so now what I'd like to do is do a bit of a live demonstration of how we could add a new link. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I've already made a search page over here, search.js, but I need to make sure that we can actually route to it. So in navigation here, I'm going to add a new nav link. So I'll do nav.link here. And in here, I'll just say search. And what I like to do whenever I do that is just make sure that it's showing up properly. You know, it's still looking the same, but when I click it, nothing's happening right now. And so what I want to do now is I want to say as link, and this will give us the functionality of the router's link, but with the styling of React Bootstrap's link. And we'll say to equals, and I'll just say /search here. And you can see that my auto formatter moved it down a line, but it's the same exact, it's the same code here. And now when I come back here, I can click on the search, and we can see that the URL has changed, but the component I want to show is not being displayed. So now I'll go back to app.js, and at the top here, I've already imported my search component, and now I'll add a new route right here. So I'll say route, and I'll close it like that. And this is the path And so the path has to match between the what we're saying the link goes to and what we have here. So I put search there, so I'll put search here as well. And then I'll say component equals search. And now when I refresh, you can see that React has reloaded the page. And now on my search link, you can see the search box that we built earlier here. And you can click and you can search. And again, all of the everything you're seeing here is Bootstrap styling. So now we can click between it all, and it all works just the same. One final thing I'll say before we finish talking about React Router is that a good design principle is to put all of your paths inside some sort of constant file so that when your navigation bar and your app file, they can both just be paths to a variable instead of paths to like a string name. And for large projects, this helps a lot in keeping straight everything. But for this small scale project, we thought it was better just to use the strings here. Hey, do you have anything to add to routing?
No, I think you totally covered everything. So
Awesome. So now we'll talk about action handlers. And Nate, I think you're going to talk a bit about this.
yeah. So how React handles a lot of the actions. We touched upon this a bit before, but this is a really important like paradigm within React. So essentially, how React handles a lot of user actions is by props. So a lot of different elements you can pass them different props. So for example, button has an on-click prop um, that you can send. You basically give it a function that you want to run on click. So if you just pull up the
Yep.
website, um,
So
yeah,
I can give the demo now if you want, Nate.
yeah.
So yeah, as Nate was saying, right, when you click on buttons, you can fire callback functions, which are things that are supposed to happen when the button's clicked. And so this home page here, you might have seen this button, hello there, that we're going to add some functionality to in a second here. And so when I click on it right now, you can see that Bootstrap is changing the color and making it kind of responsive, but it's not actually doing anything for the page. And React isn't tracking any state changes. So if we go over here to our the code again, we can go to the home page here, and you can see that this is the button that I was just touching. It says hello there. And I'm going to add a on-click handler here. And then we'll put some curly braces here. And what I like to do for simple things like this is I like to use what's called an arrow function. And an arrow function is really just like an inline function. It lets us add functions in places without actually having to define them at the component scope here. So to define an arrow function, you'll first do parentheses, and then you'll do the arrow, which is an equal and a greater than sign. And then you can add two more curly brackets. And now inside of here, you can see this is our arrow function. And what I like to do personally when I'm working with React is just always put a console log there that's just like that I'm here, and then I can go back over here, and when I inspect element and go to the console, when I click, you can see that that we're here and it's showing up in the console here, which means that it's working the way I expect it to. So now let's see if we can add some functionality. A little earlier, I made a state called troops here, and I have it currently set to false. But what I'd like to happen when I click this button is that this state variable is flipped. So I'll do a this.setState, which is something we talked about in our first presentation, and I'll say troops, and I want troops to be inverse of whatever this dot troops or this dot state dot troops is currently. Oh my goodness. And what this will do, this will set the value of troops equal to whatever troops was before, but inverted. And so since troops starts as false, when we click it, it'll go true. And down here, you can see I have a little bit of collapse that is a little surprise for when we do it. So when I now click the hello there button, you can see that now this new image has appeared, and we get a nice little animation, all courtesy of React Bootstrap. And when I click it again, it goes back away. And this is just another demonstration of how we can use on-click handlers to make our websites a little bit more dynamic and have some nice nice animations and stuff. Nate, do you have anything to add?
No, that's pretty much it. There's just a lot of different handlers that you can add to different components. So it's not just like an on click. There might be a ton of different things depending on the component. So if you encounter one of these in the future, you'll know how to handle it, especially with the arrow functions. Can you just go back to the code one more time? I just want to touch upon one more thing with the arrow functions. I'm pretty sure we talked about this in React number 1, but yeah. So if you wanted to add like function arguments in the on-click function, you just put them in the parentheses, kind of like you would a Java functions. You had like arg1, arg2, blah blah blah, and then if you want to use those, you can use them. I just want to touch upon that, just to reiterate, because this is a pretty important paradigm within React. So
Awesome. And you can see we got our great GIF of General Grievous here going on. And so we have one final thing that we'd like to talk about tonight, and that's HTTP requests. And so Nate, I think you're going to talk a bit about async await, and I'll talk a little bit about how it's actually done in practice here.
yeah. So this looks like super complicated, but I promise you this is actually like one of the easiest things that you'll do in React. So HTTP request is essentially how you can ask like your backend or some server API, hey, I have some like external data I want to use to me. That's pretty much all you're asking. You send a request and it gives you back a response. Right. So within the React application, obviously when you do something on the communicate with the server, it's going to take some time. But the nice thing about React is you don't want, if you're like, hey, can I get like the newest users posts, for example, or their comments, want the application to like wait until you're like completely done with this and like not render anything, not do anything, because this might take a couple seconds. That just leads to like pretty terrible application. So what you want to be able to do is like, you want to load more comments, but the user can still scroll and like look at things, blah blah blah. And that's kind of where async and await comes in. You kind of touch upon some of this stuff in 180, but async basically allows, in Java, it's like multiple threads can do different things at different times. But in React, if you say that a function is asynchronous, it says, okay, I'm going to run this function in the background, but we're going to keep doing things um, elsewhere while this is running. And then when it's done, I'm going to run this function for you. And then this will update the UI for you. So that's one way of handling it. And then there's another keyword that we'll talk about in a second here. It's called await. And this basically says, okay, for this specific function, I want to wait until it's, I don't want to like go fire off something else. I want to wait until this is done. We can still go do other things, but within this specific function, I want to make sure that we wait until this request is completed before we may update some data. We may update like the post. We may update like comments, for example. So this is probably best explained within an example, obviously.
I agree. And so we made a little bit of a little example here just to show off how this works. And the one thing I'll add to what Nate said is that React is uniquely suited for async await to work really well because of the way that the state is updated. You can sort of think of an async function as like a fire and forget function, right? We start the function, but we don't really wait. The rest of the page is running while that function's also running. But with the way React state works, right, as soon as that function finishes, it can update the state of the main page, and then the main page will be updated, and there's no like need to try to sync it all up and make it all look nice. So I'll go over here to the React app, and you can see we have this request demo page, and I'll just show you it working before we talk about the code. So I have this button here called make request, which works very similarly with the on click showed earlier. So you can click make request, and you can see that we have all these cards that appear. These cards were not like hiding somewhere. We made a request to a server, and the server returned to us some simple user information. We're just using a mock API website, turns like random strings with post IDs and stuff. But you could imagine in a production environment, this would be very similar to like how Instagram gets all their feed, right? Each post has an ID and other information associated with it. And I can click this clear button and make a request again. And these are actually sending requests over the internet to get this information. And so now we'll look at the code here real quick. The first thing you'll see down here is the two buttons. So there's the one button here that says make request, and you can see that on click, instead of using arrow functions, since this is slightly more complicated, we just made an actual method inside of the class. And so it says this.requestInfo. And if we go up to the requestInfo function, you can see that requestInfo is labeled as async. And that's an important keyword. If you'd like to use any of the async await features, you have to label your functions as asynchronous so that React and the JavaScript compilers know what to do with them properly. Inside of here, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up a variable called response that equals await fetch the request URL. And that there's a lot in this one line here, so I'm going to break it down bit by bit. The first piece of information here, request URL, is just a constant that I defined up here for the request, the link that we're trying to request to. And we can change this out for any type of link that we have. For example, you could have your own API that you want to access, and you could just put your own link there. You don't necessarily have to put it in a constant here. That's just for convenience in this situation. Fetch here is a function that's built into all modern web browsers, and it's the way that I would personally recommend doing API requests in a modern environment. The Fetch API again is built into everything. You don't have to import a module to use it. It just works in anything you want. So fetch is the way we do the request, and fetch goes to this URL, asks for the information, and then returns it back to our code. Fetch is an asynchronous call, which means that it can run in the background because when we access information over the internet, it takes quite a while to get. But this keyword await means that we'll wait for fetch to finish running before we move on. For example, if I didn't have await here, what React would do is React would say, okay, var response equals fetch request URL. And then it would immediately start going to the next line before waiting to see when fetch returns. This is obviously not ideal because we want to know what fetch says before we keep moving. And so that's what this await keyword allows us to do. So we can say, all right, React, don't keep running this function until this call finishes. When this call finishes, then the next thing we do here, and this is just a fragment of the way fetch works, is that we need to decode the body, and it's really just a one-liner. It's quite easy. All you say is that var body equals response.json with the parentheses here. And JSON, again, is a asynchronous call, so we need to await to make sure that we get that. Now, I know that what's in this body is an array of posts from this mock API endpoint that we're using. So the next thing I want to do is I'll set the state to be of data to be just equal to whatever we got from this request. And you can see that up here, by default, data is null. And that's sort of the whole flow you'll look for when you're making a request, is you'll ask for the response, then you'll decode the body, and then you'll do stuff with the body. So the body could have lots of information. It could have user IDs. It could have picture links. It could have, in this case, post meta information. And then you'll process it in some way after that. And so then in this case, we're just keeping it simple, just setting the data attribute in our state equal to the body that we got from this request. Down here, the next thing that I'll show is that when we get this data, we want to process it and make it look nice. And so in our render function inside of our class here, so you can see we're in our request class and it has a render function. We want to do some processing with this state before we display it to the user. So we'll say that if the data isn't null, right, which means that we've received data successfully, we're going to loop through all the data. And what this does here is it makes the cards that you see and it inputs the information. So I go to like this state.data at position I, and I get the title of the post or the user ID or the ID here. And it pushes it all onto this array. And then when we go down here, you can just, if you just put the array into React, it'll convert it back into the HTML that you want. And so again, you can see that when this works, we can click make request and the request happens. And I can also show in the console here, you can see that when we, in the network console here, when I make a request, you can see that there's a new request being sent, and they're all 200s because they come back successfully. And then when I clear, I can make the same request again, And these are really fast requests that download 200 posts for us right here. Nate, do you have anything to add to this?
Nope, I think you pretty much covered everything. I thought that was everything I would have covered. So
Awesome. One of the thing I wanted to mention before we finish up our presentation here is that this last page is kind of meant to be like a bring it all together type page. And so we also use the same rows and columns that Nate was talking about earlier. And this is kind of a trick you can do when you're doing lists like this, is you can wrap it in a column like this, and then wrap all of those columns inside of a row. And that's how we get this nice grid pattern that you see here. And then one other thing I want to point out with React Bootstrap and Bootstrap in general is that you can set the breakpoints that Nate was talking about like this in a row. And so when I say XS equals 1, it's saying that on extra small screen sizes, I only want to see one column of information in this row. When I get to a small screen size, I still only want to see one. When I get to a medium screen size, I want to see 2 columns next to each other. A large screen size is 3 columns, and then an XL is 4 columns. And I personally find this to be the easiest way to set like different breakpoints inside of Bootstrap. It's quite easy, and it makes your UI really responsive. And you can see right now we see 4 columns, but if I start decreasing the size, you can see now it just popped to 3 columns, and then it'll pop to 2 columns, and then when we get to 1, it just stays at 1 column the rest of the way down. And you can see that it's responsive the whole way. And that's another one of the benefits of using Bootstrap. So I'll head back over here. And I think that is the end of our presentation. If anyone has questions in the future, feel free to reach out to me. My name's Hugh Broman. I'm in the Slack for Hack the Future. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about React. Again, I want to mention that all of the code you saw today is available in the GitHub, and there'll be a link in the video below that you can check it out on your own computer. If you choose setting it up, feel free to reach out to Nate or I, and we'll do our best to help you.
yeah, just want to say thanks again for listening, everybody. Hopefully this was helpful, and as always, feel free to reach out with any questions.